Good evening, this is John Milburn for PROP13001 Property Development. This is week 12 tutorial. Well, I think this is a first. I'm here alone at the moment, so I'll provide you with some information to supplement what I have done in the formal lecture, which is really quite short. And this week, the topic is emerging markets. This is examinable. The exam is, I believe, on the 12th of June, Tuesday at 9 a.m. However, having said that, make sure that you check my CQU and verify for yourself your examination conditions. So the exam is not a take-home paper. This is an invigilated examination, and you will need to attend an examination centre and complete that examination live at that time. There's no opportunity for extensions or things of that nature. So please be well prepared for that. All right, so week 12, emerging markets, as I mentioned, is examinable. And in week 12, there are a few key concepts for you to consider. The reading is in chapter 12, Read and Sims. And there is reference reading available to you from the World Trade Organization, and importantly, an article by Associate Professor Garrick Small of CQU regarding rising sea levels and the effect that it might have on property values. That article is interesting in that it focuses on the effects of rising sea levels and property values in Coogee in Sydney. So when we're talking about emerging markets, we're basically talking about threats and opportunities. Threats in the sense of things like international property trends and how that might affect local players, particularly through multinationals having greater diversity in markets through advances in technology, and threats through things like rising sea levels. So for a property developer, even when well established, circumstances may change dramatically. So therefore it is important to consider those global threats. However, the content of emerging markets also provides opportunities. And in particular for Australian property developers, the opportunity to invest, to have property which is available for overseas investors is critically important. But it means looking at what the overseas property investors want and what they're prepared to pay, and importantly, what approvals they might be able to achieve in order to make the acquisition. So having some up-to-date information about foreign investment and policy, guideline and permissions is critical in terms of property development process and decision making. It is possible for local players to obtain the benefit of globalisation by joining with, in some form, the larger multinational players. So that's a strategic decision that needs to be considered at a domestic level. All right, so look at the article in relation to climate change. Think about how that might affect any property development that is by the sea. Also, think about developing a strategy to deal with emerging markets. And in that regard, have a look at the step-by-step analysis, which is contained in your text at 12.5. That's a reference to the study by Griffin and Puste, and it provides the 5 steps for decision-making in relation to a global profile. It's essentially saying that a well-planned and executed strategy is necessary. All right, so this week, when in the context of emerging markets, property developers need to consider the international effect of globalism, or globalisation rather, especially in regimes that encourage the relaxation of trade barriers. Property developers are always looking to secure markets, and that may mean having to sell to overseas buyers in relation to property off the plan. Think about the problems associated with emerging markets. When you're preparing for your examination, think about what are the drivers that encourage the expansion of property development into other countries. Why are developing countries so appealing to property developers, and should a local developer develop an overseas strategic alliance, or try to invest property directly, to develop property directly overseas or in Australia for um, emerging markets. And the second aspect of tonight's work is to consider climate change, rising sea levels, and how that might impact on a property development. All right, so in terms of further tips for the examination, I'll refer you to the examination guide that I released, I think, in week 10. Have a look at the videos. Monica's joined us. Hi, Monica. Hi, Monica. I've started to record the session. I wasn't sure if anyone was going to attend tonight. So thank you for attending. And I was just saying that to supplement the commentary that I've provided on emerging markets, that it is important to look at the examination guide that I prepared for week 10. Also, think about the weekly problems. And the best advice I think I can give you is to concentrate on the weekly problems and have at least a skeleton to each weekly problem ready that you could use if one of those problems or more of them happen to be on the examination or something similar to them happens to be on the examination. Have a look at my video in relation to what I call level 3 examination and short take-home paper preparation, which essentially provides some background as to what I expect, what I think you should do in terms of leading up to this invigilated examination, which, as I mentioned, I believe is scheduled for Tuesday, the 12th of June. So once you've looked at the weekly questions, developed an answer, either in skeleton form or you can write it in full if you wish, you should have incorporated material from your textbook, from the study guides, from the weekly Zoom sessions, both lectures and tutorials, and the reference material that I've provided in the weekly summaries. That reference material importantly contains information from legislation and regulations, and it refers to external websites. Now, in the examination, you won't have access to the internet, so you won't have an opportunity to click on AUSTLE or Queensland legislation, for example, and access legislation. So what's your strategy going to be in terms of dealing with legislation? All of the acts, the regulations, the legislation generally that we've discussed during the term is examinable. So what tactics will you employ? Well, one thing you could do is print the entire pieces of legislation and regulations, but that would be a huge task, very expensive. You could buy printed versions of the legislation and the regulations, but again, very expensive and also very bulky. And I don't think practically you'll have time to do much research during the examination. So it's really a matter of whether you've got the answer there or not. What you could consider as an interim step is to print a summary of the sections. So not the sections themselves, but just a list of the section number and the content, so that, or a heading rather, so you've got an idea as to the content, and at least you can refer to it in the examination. But better still, is the best solution is look at the weekly problems and come up with an answer to that. Now, you might say, well, that's a lot of work to do, but it should be. It's not an intensive course. We haven't got a large or difficult textbook, but you do need to have thought through each of those issues that are referred to in the weekly problems as the priority. Make sure that you take your notes into the examination. So it is open book with the exception of accessing the internet. You can take in your notes, study guides, textbook. You can take in the answers to each one of the weekly problems. And if you happen to get the weekly problem on the exam or something very similar to it, then there's nothing wrong with simply transcribing what you've already prepared. So in that sense, you want to have some idea of how much you can write within the time period, and I believe that the examination is 2 hours. All right, so Monica, don't mean to put any pressure on you, but if you've got any questions, please unmute your microphone or use the chat facility, because I'm getting close to wrapping up the session. Now, of course, the other thing that you can do is ask questions through UCrew in particular. And thank you for those students who have already been doing that. If you haven't looked at UCrew, I'd urge you to do so, because there's some good discussions there. And I expect during the next 2 weeks that there will be some lively discussions. You can certainly discuss the content of the course. You can discuss the weekly problems, any of the study guide materials, or you can ask questions. If you want to ask a question, then generally it's best to do so through UCrew, so that two things will happen. The first is that if I happen to provide a response to the question, then everyone in the class has the opportunity to consider that response, which means that it's not as though I'm favouring any particular student. The second is, and this is really important, that when you ask a question, my experience is that students will very happily and with some degree of expertise, I might add, provide responses to those questions, which can be very useful. It provides an opportunity for collaborative learning. It also means that the course is not focused entirely about me, but there is some exchange directly between students. So for all of those reasons, I encourage you not only to use UCrew, but to respond to others' requests and questions that may be raised in UCrew. All right, well, as we come to an end of the unit, Monica, any questions before I wrap up? Anything you'd like to discuss about the content? Hi.
Yeah, hi. No, it's fine. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't missing anything. So, because I missed last week's lecture, but I did have a look at it on
That's good.
your recording.
All right, thank you very much. So yes, and that is a reminder that all of the lectures, which are relatively short, and the tutorial sessions, which are also quite short, are uploaded week by week in Moodle. So if you haven't already been through each of the weeks, please do so now. And you'll see that I've laid them out in the same format every week, starting with the lectures, and typically there are two. One is the lecture itself, and below that you'll see the tutorial. Very easy to find. If you haven't looked at all of the Zoom sessions, then I urge you to do that before the examination. So that's the Zoom session lecture and the Zoom session tutorial. And other than that, we have the study guides, the weekly problems, and other resources, each of those week by week. So it's all available. It's unlikely that I'll provide you with individual updates of the links, but just go week by week to each one of those links. So thank you. All right, well, it's been a pleasure to act as your unit coordinator in this brand new unit, property development. I hope that you have enjoyed the learning process. I hope that we've provided some valuable content. Just a reminder, please, for those students that have already had their say, thank you very much. For those that haven't, I see there's 5 out of the small cohort of 23 have already completed their have their say, the big red button on the top left-hand corner. If you haven't already done that, please do so. It's very important for the university, and it's very important for me. All right, so any questions through UCrew? It's been a pleasure. I'll sign off now. Thank you for joining us tonight, Monica, and all the very best. We'll see you at some stage over the next few weeks.
Good night. Thanks,
Okay.
John.
Thank you. Bye.